What does an 18-year veteran of the tech industry and a 20-year veteran of the military have in common? More than you might think. Welcome, everyone, to the Second Act Podcast, leveling up your life's journey.
You can't stop me. You don't got the power. Shut me down. That's not enough. I'm my biggest problem. You don't got the power. Shut me down. That's not enough. You can't stop me.
All right, welcome back, everyone. In our last episode, we talked about bringing guests onto the show, and we have a very special guest today. You may not know this, but there's a third member of our team working behind the scenes. And man, without this person, we definitely wouldn't have this podcast.
Amen to that.
We are super excited to introduce Jeremy Balon, owner of the Seltzer King podcast network. And he's responsible for making Michael and I sound good when you are listening to us on your favorite platform. Jeremy's also been helping us evolve in the way that we provide access and awareness to our listeners. So incredible individual he is. And if you want to check out the latest, head over to michaelandjohn.com. Jeremy, man, thanks for agreeing to be our first guest.
Yeah, thanks for having me, fellas. What a weird twist that we have here. I mean, I'm usually here, but it's not in this capacity. So thank you, guys.
Yeah, we're bringing you out from behind the curtain.
Yeah,
so.
Very weird, but no, I mean, I'm used to it. I've done it on other things. You know, I have other podcasts and stuff. So, but I do love producing and stuff. So it's been fun getting to know you guys, and yeah, I'm psyched. I'm psyched to be here. Thank you.
Man, we're stoked to have you.
Yeah.
Michael, why don't you tell our audience a little bit about Jeremy?
Absolutely. Jeremy, a person of many talents. He grew up in Ohio, now resides in Brooklyn, New York. Made a career in film and TV over the last 20 years, working in production on award-winning sets, as well as built out a podcast network, which I think has been mainly focused on comedy, with some of the most popular podcast names over the last decade that include The Adventures of Danny and Mike, The Bradshaw Boys, and Bad Advice. So let's kick things off. So Jeremy, you grew up in a small town in Ohio, landed later in life in the Big Apple, New York City. Now Brooklyn, one of the boroughs. Tell us about that journey.
That was the first second act. That was one of those early second acts where you're in school and you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, and you go to college a little bit, and you're just trying to figure out life. And that's kind of where I was when I moved to New York. I knew I wanted to do film and TV stuff, and I had gotten sort of a position on a John Sayles film, who is a really incredible independent director, and had the incredible opportunity to live in his house in Hoboken, New Jersey for a little while. That was my first experience with New York. Was basically I just rolled in one night and was from Ohio, from a town of 1,000 people, and I roll over this hill looking into the city, and it's just, I freak out. It's just overwhelming for me.
Yeah.
But I took as you do on this podcast, I took a breath. The patented, Michael
Second
and John
act.
pause. Yeah.
Yeah.
I got a hotel. I stayed the night. I woke up, and in the morning, it didn't feel so bad. It didn't feel so threatening. But
Yeah.
So yeah, that's sort of what I always wanted to do. I always wanted to do film and TV stuff. So I kind of attacked it. And here we are 20 years later on my second act.
Is that second act squared? Is that what do we call
Probably.
something like that? Yeah.
I feel like that's a t-shirt. Yeah, ready to get made.
Let me jump in. I got two things.
Yeah.
One, JB, Jeremy, we lovingly refer to you as JB. I haven't got that moniker yet here on the show, but I want to say you have a great voice for a podcast, for being on the backside of the curtain. A great voice, man. I'm like digging it. But I want to go back to something you just said. Rolling over the hill, nighttime, see the big lights.
Mm-hmm.
There's some glitz and glamour to that, and it's obviously captured in movies and iconicized in our minds as the big city, right? But you talked about being there at night, but then the next day, daylight shows up, and all of a sudden everything's not so scary. And I think that's something really important that we like to try to capture here on the second act about clarity, right? Whether it's daylight, whether it's time, whether it's taking that second breath, whether that's whatever it is, right? Just giving that pause, allowing things to kind of settle, sun to rise, maybe more information to come in, maybe a little bit, of a redirected purpose. But for you, it sounds like, it literally was the sunlight, but I think also just daylight, it shows you, it shrinks things down, right? It brings into perspective the unknown.
Absolutely. Somehow I just sort of acted, it wasn't like I could turn around at that point. I was 10 hours into the journey and to New York from Ohio and but I think all of the tools that I've sort of the family had taught me at that point, and I just knew that I worked on this film called Half Nelson, and there's a very poignant part in the movie where he's talking about tomorrow, and like there's always a tomorrow, and there's always something that when the sun comes up, it's a new day. So I've kind of like lived by that, where it's like it could suck today. And I've had some dark days and dark months and probably dark years post-pandemic especially, but yeah, it's important, I think, to really focus in on like taking that breath and then resetting and saying this is something I can accomplish, because the night before I was unsure, lost in Jersey City. So yeah, it was but yeah, it's just take a breath, take a pause.
And so let's back up in your journey. Let's talk about some of the personal hardships you encountered at a young age. Can you fill us in on that?
Well, I at age 10, 9-ish, was basically they found a golf ball size. See, I shouldn't be doing podcasts. I can't speak. They found a golf ball size tumor in the back of my head. I was 9 years old. For me, I think I wasn't progressing like my younger brother was. So my mom really saw that, my younger brother started to look older than my the middle kid. So, that was a weird time in my life. Let's just say that it taught me a lot. It taught me, it honestly, like, just seeing a community rally around you. I lived in a small town, and you would see, people reaching out and making dinner for you or for your family. And like the amount of like outreach for something like that is incredible. And I'm very thankful to have a very solid base back in Ohio that I care about very much and get to visit a lot. But yeah, so it was, they basically found a tumor, and I had to have, oh man, I don't know if we want to get into the details on this podcast because it is kind of gross, but they took a laser and they just cut right underneath my lip.
Oh my gosh.
And then they lift your face up and go back in there and carve out a tumor. Wow. So yeah, that took a long time. I think mentally it's still affecting me in my adult life. I think I still am affected by when people think I'm younger than I am, and that's something I've dealt with my entire life, body image stuff. Sure. But yeah, it all stems from a weird little brain tumor in 1985.
Wild.
What does that do at 9 years old? I think if I were to have a tumor now, or undergo some procedure like that, I've got a lot more perspective. I've got a lot more things to, think about, right? And I'm a father, and I'm a husband, and so I've got these roles that I'm fulfilling, and so I put it in a different context. But at 9 years old, happy-go-lucky kid thinking about summers and swimming at the pool. Does that change how you look at life? Does that change how you go on a day-to-day basis?
100%. I don't know if mentally that stuff seeps in as a kid, that like you're facing death. Yeah. I mean, I certainly knew it as a kid, and I knew the consequences, and I knew that if this tumor was cancerous, it wouldn't turn out well. Luckily, it was benign. But I absolutely, I think my whole entire life I've focused on trying to not judge people by the way they look, because I was judged every day
Sure.
of my life, going into work, trying to work in the film industry and establish myself as someone who is professional and can do the job, but looks like a 14-year-old. That sometimes doesn't mesh well with each other. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of that deep-seated stuff that comes out later in life, and I've dealt with it, since. But yeah, I think it's a changes you, top to bottom, front to back. Like it makes you
Sure.
a completely different person, I think. But I think I've grown from it. Yeah, I think I've learned and grown, and I had a very good support system. Shout out to the Children's Hospital, Cincinnati, and the Ronald McDonald House that put up my parents
That's
for
awesome.
months and months.
Wow.
And I'm not the biggest McDonald's fan as far as like corporations go, but I still, every day, if I go somewhere in McDonald's, I put money in that jar because it's important.
Yeah.
You have no idea what that does to families.
Man.
Imagine me being 10 years old, 9 years old, and not having my family there,
No.
because they lived an hour and 10 minutes away. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Without stuff like that, without those foundations, could have been a lot darker. But yeah, we're very lucky, very lucky.
Yeah, if you've ever had the blessing of being in the care of the Children's Hospital, my son was there last summer, I think it was, or spring. He had caught something that he was in there for an entire day, and the people, the administration, the staff, everybody working in there is just outstanding. It's an incredible experience to make children feel comfortable in a not so comfortable situation.
Yeah.
And just, your situation that you just described is, times 10. So I can imagine if what they did for him translated into what they did for you. It's just awesome to hear. So that life-changing event that has impacted you from an appearance perspective, you said it maybe impacted you from a work perspective in that regard. How did you use it to motivate you and cause sort of like a paradigm shift in the way that you do things going forward?
I think it gives you that, life or death perspective at 9 years old, that even though I didn't understand it, but I think it did. And I think that made me reach a little further. I don't think I'd be here without that process and without sort of going through this traumatic event with my family. And shout out to my mom. She's my hero. So she caught all this and was there every single time. And
Yeah.
so very lucky in a lot of ways. Very, very lucky.
It just speaks to the resilience of people in general. And we've talked about this on the show before, but how, there's times when we go through instances or, times in our lives where we can't imagine anything good coming from the backside of what we're going through. But just as you've been talking about this brain surgery altering the way that you think about life, Michael's son going to the doctor and coming out of, the Children's Hospital better than he was before changes a little bit of the perspective of now time. Me having a daughter, losing her after, some time changes our perspective. But when you're in those instances, you don't ever think that something good is going to happen after that. But it's amazing to look back and see the changes that have occurred because of those instances and realize how much further you've come and how much better off you are most of the time for encountering those things. And people on the outside look and say, I could never go through that. I never want to go through that. But that's part of our stories, right? It's part of our stories, and it's what's made us
Who we are.
It's what's drawn us together. It's what's put us on the show. It's what allows us to help other people get through what they're going through. So I want to make sure that people don't diminish what they're going through, because on the backside, it's going to have an effect and power in somebody else's life, if not our own.
Yeah, and you just said it, Jeremy. If those things hadn't happened, you might not be here doing what you do today, having this podcast network, sitting here with John and me. Like this event, this moment in time wouldn't even be happening, which is kind of like a crazy thing to think about.
Crazy. It's the feather in the water ripple thing, whatever that is. I think about it a lot too. Just if I were taking a right turn somewhere or a left turn somewhere or not, and you see people, I think I'm a really good judge of character post brain surgery, because there are a lot of times where I can spot the asshole immediately, because I just know, there's a good chance they haven't experienced a lot of the life stuff that other people have,
Man, that's good.
So you've been pursuing your second act, the second act squared,
right?
The Seltzer Kings network,
right?
And hoping it becomes your primary business source of income as an entrepreneur. Tell us a bit about how you even got the name, how it got started, and then why it is you're so passionate about what you do. Because at least from my perspective, John and I are so appreciative of how well you make us sound every week for the audience.
I think I think when you're in it, you feel that way sometimes, but from the outside looking in, I think you guys are more cool, calm, and collected than you think you are. I mean, the second act, I feel like I put everything I had into becoming the best at what I did in New York City. And I think when you do that and I worked on incredible projects, met incredible actors, directors, everything, but you don't have a lot of ownership. It's a lot of, you're working yourself to the bone, crazy hours, on your feet. Obviously it's not the military, which I'm not complaining at all, because I know that, there's a lot of there's worse jobs out there, but it wore on me as the years, went by.
Of course.
And I see a lot of things happening. I see people dying. I see basically working themselves to death. I've had people collapse, in front of me on set. Like, it's just, I think at some point when you're working so hard at something and you are succeeding and you're doing really great projects, but at some point I hit a wall, basically, is what I'm trying to say. And I just knew that if I kept this track, I could see where I was going to be in 20 years. I could just see it. I knew I was going to be that exhausted person who, just puts everything he has into his career and gets kind of very little back other than money. Money's a huge thing. Obviously, we all need that. But but I just wanted something more. And I started, I did sketch comedy for a while with my buddy Danny. And we had some varied success and featured on some things and had a lot of fun doing it, obviously. And that sort of transitioned to Danny is half of Pete and Pete, which is a 90s Nickelodeon staple. Like, it's just a legendary show from the 90s. And I was a little too old for it, so I knew of it, but I didn't know it exactly. But basically, when I sort of, Danny and I creative partners, so I just kept pushing him, like, we should just do a Pete and Pete podcast, because I know people want it. I know there's an audience. So that was kind of it. And we just started, molding it into what we wanted it to be. And we failed forward quite a bit, which is very hard to do. I know you guys have talked about that a lot, but
we're doing it right now.
Yeah.
Failing forward. It's part of the process.
It's part of it, and it's hard because in industries like that, failure is the worst possible scenario because you're costing people money.
You get to a certain point in your life, it seems like everybody who we're talking to who can relate to the second act hits that invisible wall, and it's either something that's happened to them or to someone that they know and are close to. And again, it's that sort of like wake up calls, like, hold on a second. what am I doing? Do I really want to be doing this? Am I enjoying it? I mean, I'm sure everybody wants to know just Seltzer Kings, how you came up with that name. It's an unusual name.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it all stemmed from several episodes in the Danny and Mike podcast where basically it's just something we love it. We're huge seltzer fans. Before there was a huge seltzer boom, we would order like the special seltzer. We had an episode where we drank it with a comedian, Kurt Braunholer, and I ordered it from the internet, and it was, 2 years old. And so we just have always had this obsession with seltzer, and that became a talking point on the podcast. And when I was building out the old studio, it just sort of became Seltzer King Studios. So
Nice.
It's kind of like a little niche-y,
I love it.
When you're recording with us, free seltzer, obviously. But so that was always the sort of initial bump of the name. But yeah, I think it's just, I don't know. I've never been huge on. I mean, I have a sketch group called Man Boobs, so it's not. I'm not the best at naming things.
Your naming
but,
convention is a little abstract.
A little bit, but
Blood
yeah.
Orange Pellegrino. That's my.
That's your sketch comedy name?
Then no. Well, that's my seltzer of choice.
Oh, there you go.
Blood Orange Pellegrinos. But yeah, the creative names, I would say, you probably got me there. I don't think the creative part of my brain works as well as some of the other more logical side of the brain. I try, but it's not. If I don't have anything to compare it to, I'm like, this is awesome. And then I look at people who are gifted and I'm like, shit, this is just not.
I think you can do that really easily in what we do, especially in the podcast world, because there's so many. But again, it's about the grind. It's about putting in the work, trying to get that 1% better. If I could steal your sayings.
I stole it before
great.
the show, so it's fine. Steal away.
Great. Yeah, but post Danny and Mike, I produced a podcast for another child star, Lori Beth Denberg, who used to be all over Nickelodeon. And then I've been doing a couple other small things, and then started the business side of Seltzer Kings, which is producing podcasts, sort of soup to nuts, top to bottom for clients. So it's evolving. The entire network is evolving, and we're trying to really put the push into making it something where people want to come and hang out and listen to stories. That's kind of the biggest thing. I just love storytellers. I love hearing stories. So that's kind of what we're trying to do with Seltzer Kings.
That's awesome.
Well, you've done awesome. And we, John and I lean into your expertise in this area in every way that we can. So thank you again.
Yeah. So Jeremy, you also have a site, and it's Remy Balon, right? So like Jeremy Balon, but Remy, REMYBALON.com, right? That showcases some of the things that you've created in music. Is that right?
Well, it's jeremybalon.com. So it used to be remybalon.com.
Okay.
I used to play music, so I have that was sort of my first love. I played acoustic music. I had music featured on the Half Nelson soundtrack. Very lucky to be featured on that movie, and then
Oscar nominated, I believe.
Oscar nominated film.
That's
yes.
pretty.
Wow.
That's kind of a big deal.
Kind of a big deal.
Wow.
I still use it in my monikers. Just you gotta use it if you got it. But yeah, it's I played a lot. I played out a lot. I love music. Still do. Still play a little bit, but not to the sort of effect that I would used to do. But yeah, it was just one of my first loves. Coming out of high school, I just loved playing guitar, and my grandpa was a big band musician. In Ohio, Hugh Manker and the Stardusters. Shout out
Nice.
to that 40s, 50s super group.
And what did he play?
He was sort of a jack of all trades, but he did piano and drums. So he would play one or the other, depending on the band. But Gene Krupa opened for him once. That was his sort of claim to fame. One of the best drummers ever. So I took a lot from that, that sort of musical background of my grandfather, and we had music in our lives, every day.
Yeah.
That's just something that we really focused on, and Grandpa was always playing stuff and making up songs, and I think I just sort of grabbed it and tried to run with it, and I got further than a lot of people do, and I'm very proud of all that music. And
listening to you talk about how your grandfather was in music, and then how you kind of took that on yourself. It's interesting to me to think about how people develop over time just through osmosis, right? Just through being in the room with people. I look back at my history, and my dad was running an airport, and I was always going to air shows, always walking around airplanes, and didn't have necessarily a direct correlation that I wanted to find between what my dad was doing and what I did. But I wind up 22 years old, and I'm joining the Marine Corps to fly. And it's not something that we talked about a ton, but it does come up in conversation. I think just you being around your grandfather, being in that presence, being in the room, listening to music. It's, you hear about these kids whose parents, all they do is jam out to, some great vinyl and listen to some of the greatest, bands of all time. And then they end up writing music or doing something because they're just in that environment on a daily basis. And it kind of segues into how you put yourself in the room and who you're putting yourself in the room with. And if you're putting yourself in the room with successful people, or people who are optimists, or striving to be better, or whatever, you are going to get some of the benefit from just being around those people.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of, acting the part until you really know what you're doing. It's not cheating. I don't think it's not shorting yourself, but it is.
Right.
If you can put yourself in a room of successful people and act like you've been there, you can do anything.
Sure.
You really can. And I've learned a lot of that from, just being in the room of some of the biggest stars and directors, and, if you just get to that point, you know what I mean? And then if your background has sort of trained you, and, you're not a menacing, horrible person, it's probably going to work out for you, because you're setting yourself up to succeed. But...
So, Jeremy, do you have any advice for people who are in those rooms who may be lacking a little bit of that confidence because they're surrounded with those by very successful people who have achieved things, either personally or professionally or both? Like, what tips or advice could you give them so that they sort of emulate the confidence you're going in the room, whether it's real or you're faking it at the moment?
Well, it becomes real. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it certainly could be faked initially, but again, I think it's my grandpa. He used humor. I mean, he was a guy who could walk in basically any room and just light it up, because he just exuded, like, I'm in it. I want to do it. It's something I love. I'm going to show you why I love it. And I think so. I think that's a huge thing for me, is like, sometimes you do need to just break the ice a little bit and keep it light and say, we're all here to do something, but it's not saving lives. And especially in my line of work, we say that a lot. We're not saving lives. We're just making television
John
shows.
could actually probably
John
say
is
that.
Different.
No.
Yes. John's different.
Yeah.
But us, no. So yeah, I think humor is a huge thing for me. Just being able to, like, break that ice and just say, hey, we're all in this together. Let's put our heads forward, and see where it leads. Because I've had a lot of luck of just doing the work and seeing what happens. You know what I mean? And I when I talk to Michael, sometimes it's completely over my head, because a lot of the data side and the tech side, I'm never been trained that way. My brain doesn't think that way. I'm a creative type, but so it's stuff I want to learn, but yeah, and I'm open to learning it. I want to learn it for the business, but yeah, it's hard, coming from I think everybody has a different personality type. Creatives, data-driven people, numbers people,
Yep.
So I think finding your little niche, using a little humor, and then just act like you've been there, if you haven't been there before. So
Yeah, connecting on that human level, playing into your strengths, and finding that harmony with the group that you're with there to do big things with.
Yep.
I mean, that's the magic recipe, and we've talked about that, John. You and I have talked about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Over our 7 episodes that we've had, and now the 8th. And I can relate, Jeremy. I've had a special connection with my grandfather who passed away, and my dad. I've learned strong work ethic. I've learned the connection. I've learned the importance of academics and hard work, in that process. So, those that are closest to you, if you're fortunate enough in this world to have, those family mentors, it's a super special thing.
And I'll go back, when we talk about being in that room, right? And kind of faking it till you make it is, I think, what you're kind of alluding to. But I will say, once you get into that room, I have found it to be incredibly rewarding to actually take a step back and find one of those individuals that you kind of want to emulate, and then just let them know, hey, I don't know how I'm here. I don't know why I'm in this room with you, but I would love to learn from you as much as I can. And sometimes just having that humility to announce that you are not in the same, place as that person, but you would love to just garnish information from them and be able to see how they act and see how they do things. It can kind of create that connection and really make the person that you're trying to follow step in and really want to be a part of your growth and your success. And so sometimes that humility does play into it, and you can gain a lot more by not faking it until you make it, but admitting your shortfalls and admitting that you just are there to learn. And man, there's nothing like a couple individuals in a room who are steps ahead of you, who they're all kind of, giving each other information and helping each other grow, but then they reach down and help you and bring you up to that level. It's groundbreaking. So
it's a great point, John. And it's very disarming, right? To the folks who are successful. You're not, you want to be in the room, but letting people know, that you're not at where they're at in life. You're going to find, it's likely you're going to find someone who, to your point, John, is going to put a hand out and help you.
Yeah.
It's a special feeling.
Yeah.
Should we move? I think we're getting a little bit sort of closer to our ending time here. I wanted to ask you one last question, Jeremy, before we sign off. First of all, I'm so grateful for all that you do for us, and now that I can call you a friend, it's amazing how much we've learned that we have in common, the three of us.
Yeah.
Being big MJ, Michael Jordan fans, and some of our favorite films growing up and all that kind of stuff. But the last question I want to ask you is, you've been privy to the stuff that John and I have been talking about over the last 7 episodes, the topics, what we're doing in our second act. What have been some of the biggest takeaways from you as a listener and an editor of our conversations?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that you guys are in it. You're doing it. Regardless of if it's hugely popular or, 2 people listen to the podcast. We're doing this thing.
Thanks, Mom.
That motivates each and every one of us and hopefully motivates people who listen. I mean, when I edit the podcasts, when I sit here with you guys and record the podcasts, every single episode, there's something where I'm like, yep, I'm taking that away, as like, that's not only great advice, but that's something that I can plug into my life. Specific example wise, I mean, the 1% thing I think has been I think I really get lost in the bigger picture of things sometimes.
Sure.
And it's hard to it's hard to sort of realize that even 1% is progress.
Absolutely.
Because sometimes it doesn't always feel like that, but I think that's been a big thing for me, is just incrementally get better. You know what I mean? And then there's strengths and weaknesses things I think you guys talked about, of just knowing what those are, and there's a few others, but I probably should have prepped and wrote these down. But every episode I listen to with you guys, there's something where I'm like, oh yeah, that not only does that would help me, but I would sure help a lot of people out in this world. So
I think that's good, JB, and I think to sum that up, listening to other people's stories, listening to other perspectives, listening to somebody that's a couple steps ahead of you, man, there's always so much to gain. And when I think, oh, I've got this area figured out, I'm tracking in on a good course, and I don't really need those other data points or what somebody else did, because that's different than what I'm doing now. When I open up my ears to actually listen to what they went through, I find that I take away so many gems of wisdom and knowledge and information that shortens kind of my journey. It can shorten the journey to just allow me to reach success, or what I deem as success, a little quicker, a little smoother. And so, I just, encourage people to get out there and listen to, other people that are just a few steps ahead of them, because they'll find that it's incredibly rewarding. So, man, we really appreciate it. But
I think too, a lot of times there's that wall of like, they're doing something that's bigger, better than I'm doing. Sure. And there's that wall you don't want to climb. But I've learned, like, just approaching people, especially if there's differences involved, just say, let's put it on the table. Let's just talk about it. And, whether it's, two podcasts with a similar theme, or whether it's, two people with similar message, like, building that community is huge. It's a very, very huge thing. And knowing that, and especially you guys, allowing people into that circle and allowing them to be motivated by you guys, I think is incredible. And just having this, and I know there's lots of things out there that do this, but I think you guys have a specific message that I really stand behind. And I think you guys are awesome people, awesome families. I've met your families at this point.
We paid him to say all this, by the way.
Yeah,
checks
the full JB endorsement. Let's end on that right there.
But I'm proud of you guys for coming in this blind. I think you guys have done a great job. And again, as not the podcast expert, but just someone with a lot of experience, I think you guys are doing great. And I hope we can keep up the work.
Love it.
Yeah,
man. Michael, what do you say? We call it a day?
Yeah, Jeremy, it's been a pleasure, as always, talking with you as our first guest. So thank you for being the metaphorical guinea pig in this in this process. And thank you for giving the audience a window into your life. I know sometimes talking about some of the things that you shared are really difficult, but use that to persevere and overcome adversity, which makes for an amazing story. And those things that have impacted you and why you're pursuing your second act. Hopefully it helps people understand, being vulnerable and sharing that stuff lets people know that there's so many others out there who have had the struggles, who have had to go through some hardships, who have had to use that as motivation. And I know John and I are finding that just in our one-on-one conversations we're having with listeners and others about where they are in life and whether they're contemplating or on the second act, that again, that vulnerability and just opening up, letting people sort of share that and be part of that community is super helpful.
Yep.
Indeed. Indeed.
Well, that's a wrap, guys. I think we are building out a great list of guests. I mean, we started off with JB, Jeremy Balon. Man, I thank you so much for being on the show. I look forward to, building this out and having a couple other people come on as well, and just really get to hear, just like we did today, about their experiences in their second act. So, man, thanks so much.
Of course.
And Jeremy, if you could tell our listeners where they can see more about you or hear more about you.
On the internet's DannyandMike.com is the Adventures of Danny and Mike podcast. If you want to go even darker and deeper into my background, there's some episodes on there that they're pretty heavy, but a lot of fun. But yeah, check me out, Instagram, Facebook. It's all Remy Balon or Jeremy Balon, or SeltzerKings.com if you're looking to get a fine podcast made.
All right.
Awesome.
Right. Thank you so much, man. We'll see you guys all next week.
Thank you, fellas.
See ya. Thanks, guys.
Onward and upward.
The second act with Michael and John features Michael Newborn and John Ballenger. The podcast is produced by Seltzer Kings. For more information on the show, check out michaelandjohn.com, or if you'd like to get involved in the conversation, give the guys a shout on their socials at The Second Act with Michael and John on most platforms. Thanks for listening.
You can't